A bitter wind howled through the pines, the kind that sliced through skin like a bone-handled knife. Snowflakes danced, swirling in a chaotic ballet, their icy touch a reminder that this land, Scandinavia, cared little for the warmth of human life. In this realm, where winter temperatures plummeted to 20 degrees, survival was not a right, but a relentless battle. Here, the ground was as unforgiving as the blizzards that swept across it, and the only sound one could trust was the dull crunch of snow underfoot. A lone figure trudged through a grove of gnarled trees, their limbs twisted like the fates of those who dared to challenge this frostbitten landscape. He was a boy, barely more than 12, each breath exhaling clouds of vapor that mingled with the acrid scent of burning pine resin from a nearby torch. It flickered weakly against the shadows, the light struggling to push back the encroaching darkness, much like the boy's own resolve against the daunting challenges ahead. But what drove him forward, deeper into the wilderness where the wolves roamed and the ghosts of warriors lingered? His heart thudded in time with the rhythmic crunch of frost beneath his feet, each step an echo of his ancestors who had braved this land. A bone-handled knife, inscribed with ancient runes, hung from his belt, a symbol of his lineage and the expectations that weighed heavy on his shoulders. Tonight, he would join the ranks of the warriors, an initiation steeped in tradition, yet cloaked in danger. The elders spoke of the rite in hushed tones, their eyes flickering with a mix of pride and dread. But what did courage mean in a place where even the earth seemed to conspire against you? He recalled tales shared around the fire, of men who ventured into the dark and did not return. Would he face that fate? As he approached the clearing where the spirits awaited, the air thickened, crackling with the tension of unspoken fears. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he could feel it. A whisper in the wind, a promise of the unknown. Perhaps it was the warmth of his ancestors urging him on, or perhaps it was the chill of doubt. As he crossed the threshold into the clearing, the shadows deepened, and the night seemed to hold its breath. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but he pressed on, determined to carve his name into the icy tapestry of history, even if that name was all that he would ever leave behind. The moon hung high, indifferent to the struggles below, casting its silver light upon the snow. And what awaited him in the heart of that darkness was a question he dared not ask, one that might seal his fate before he even took the first step. On a crisp autumn morning, sunlight filtered through the dense canopy of ancient pines, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. A woman knelt in a patch of vibrant greens, her fingers deftly plucking wild sorrel, its tartness a welcome contrast to the hearty meats they lived on. The air was alive with the pungent aroma of damp earth and decaying leaves, a reminder that even in this bounteous land, survival often hinged on the smallest of choices. They lived in a world where the land provided abundantly, yet it was a world that demanded respect. One misjudged berry could mean the difference between life and death. What drove them to seek sustenance from such perilous sources? Nearby, a man carved a length of salted fish with the precision of an artisan. The blade glinted in the sunlight, its bone handle worn smooth by years of use. Salted herring, dried meat, and foraged mushrooms formed the staple diet of these seafaring warriors, ensuring their survival through the harsh winters that averaged 10 degrees C, sometimes plunging as low as 20 degrees C. The way they preserved food, a mix of salting, smoking, and drying, was nearly an art form, passed down through generations. They understood the concept of food as insurance, each piece of carefully stored protein a lifeline to the future. As the woman stood, a sack of foraged roots and herbs slung over her shoulder, she glanced towards the distant horizon where the fjords met the sky. Gathering food was a community affair, not just the responsibility of the individual. The knowledge shared among families turned foraging into a ritual, a dance of survival that united them. But beneath this harmony lay an undercurrent of anxiety. Would the harvest yield enough to sustain them through the long, cruel winter? Even with the most meticulous planning, there remained an element of chaos in this unforgiving landscape. Even the children joined in, learning the names of plants and the secrets of the land, their laughter echoing through the trees. They were the next generation, inheritors of the wisdom that had kept their forebears alive for centuries. But did they understand the weight of that legacy? Did they grasp the fragility of life that nestled within each harvest? As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the shadows lengthened, reminding them of winter's impending approach. The woman paused, surveying the bounty before her with a mix of pride and trepidation. This was a world of both plenty and scarcity, joy and fear. And as the chill of dusk settled around her, a question lingered in the air. How many of their kin would survive the coming frost? In that moment, the laughter of children faded, replaced by the haunting whisper of the wind through the trees, leaving her with a sense of vulnerability that clung like the frost on the ground. The true test of their resourcefulness was yet to come. In the dimly lit longhouse, the scent of warm, tangy fermentation mingled with the pungent smoke from the hearth, wrapping around the villagers like a thick blanket. Hilda, hands calloused from years of labor, crouched over a barrel, her breath fogging the air with each exhale. The thick, bubbling liquid within sloshed gently, whispering promises of sustenance through the bitter months ahead. They hadn't invented the phrase, waste not, want not, but they lived it every day. What if they could bottle summer itself, preserving its essence against the inevitable winter chill? Outside, snow fluttered down like forgotten dreams. The temperature hovered around 15 degrees, a relentless reminder of the season's grip. Hilda poured a ladleful of fermented cabbage into a clay bowl, its vibrant color a stark contrast to the world outside. Sauerkraut was not just a dish. It was a lifeline. Each crisp bite packed with vitamin C was their defense against the scurvy that crept in on the heels of frost. It was said that half of the villagers had fallen ill in previous winters, their bodies weakened by scarcities. But this year would be different. Hilda's brow furrowed as she remembered the stories of those who didn't survive. Their laughter replaced by silence. Their presence erased like footprints in the snow. Around her, the other villagers worked diligently, grinding grains for porridge and salting fish caught just weeks ago. The dried herring hung from the rafters, their scales glinting in the dying light, preserved with a meticulousness that spoke to their survival instinct. They had learned not merely to eat, but to endure. Fermentation, pickling, and drying were more than methods. They were an art form, a delicate dance of chemistry that transformed decay into longevity. But what if this year's harvest failed? What if the winter came early and the storehouses emptied before the thaw? As Hilda stirred her mixture, the bone-handled spoon scraped against the bottom of the barrel, echoing in the stillness. A sense of urgency surged through her, a primal fear that gnawed at her stomach like the first pangs of hunger. The villagers needed her to succeed. As she glanced around, she caught the eye of an elder, his face lined with the stories of survival, yet wearied by years of effort. Would her efforts be enough this time? Or were they all just delaying the inevitable? The bubbling brew simmered, a chaotic symphony of sustenance promising vitality. But at what cost? The walls of the longhouse felt closer, the shadows deeper, as the weight of winter bore down upon them. Hilda's hands trembled, caught between hope and despair. The kettle hissed like a serpent, and all she could think was, would they rise together, or would they fall one by one, swallowed by the icy grip of the night? The sun hung low over the fjord, casting shards of light that danced off the rippling surface. A group of Vikings stood chest-deep in the icy water, their breath billowing like smoke rings in the crisp air. They wielded handmade nets, the fibers intricately woven with the care of a woman braiding hair, and tossed them into the depths. The scent of the brine mixed with the sharp tang of pine needles clinging to the shore. a reminder that survival depended not just on strength, but on cunning and patience. Every splash of the net was a prayer, every pull from the water a gamble that could mean life or deprivation. As the nets filled with silver-scaled fish, the men's faces glowed with the thrill of the catch. But this was more than mere sport. It was the beating heart of their survival rhythm. They were masters of their environment, experts in the art of foraging, aware of the delicate balance of life within their realm. What drove them to brave the biting cold each day? Was it hunger, or something deeper? A need to conquer both the wild and themselves? Nearby, women gathered along the rocky outcrop, hands busy with the day's harvest, seaweed and shellfish, while children scrambled about, their laughter floating like music. They plucked limpets and mussels from the jagged coastline, a skill they'd learned before they could even wield a knife. The vibrant colors of the shells reflected the life force of the land itself, rich with nutrients that would bolster their bodies against the harsh Scandinavian winters. It was a symbiotic relationship, one that required respect for both the earth and the water that provided so abundantly. The seasonal rhythms governed their lives, fishing in the spring and summer, foraging in the fall for berries and nuts that would see them through the long winter months. They relied on the cycle of seasons as steadfastly as the sun rose and set. But what if nature turned cruel, withholding its bounty? The thought lingered on the air like a storm cloud, heavy and ominous. As twilight began to settle, the sky transformed into a fiery canvas, reflected in the water, and the men pulled their nets ashore, the day's labor behind them. Tired but satisfied, they shared stories of the catch, some spun with pride, others sprinkled with the salt of reality. Dangers lurking in the depths, storms that could sweep away a boat, the unpredictable nature of sustenance. With their bellies full, the villagers gathered around a fire, the glow illuminating their faces etched with both hope and fear. They were warriors, yes, but also foragers, fishermen, and harvesters of nature's whims. They understood that their fate rested not only on their skill with sword and spear, but also on their knowledge of the land and sea. But as the embers glowed and the shadows crept closer, one thought nagged at the back of their minds. What if tomorrow brought nothing but empty nets? The sun peeked over the horizon, lifting the heavy fog that clung to the frost-kissed fields like a shroud. A woman bent low, her fingers digging into the rich, dark soil, brushing aside the remnants of winter. She examined the earth, its texture a mix of loam and clay, perfect for the barley seeds she would sow. What if every seed was a promise? The promise of sustenance, of survival against the backdrop of a world that thrived on brutality and the unyielding forces of nature? Yards away, a sturdy wooden fence surrounded a small pen brimming with life. The low, rhythmic sounds of livestock filled the air. The bleating of sheep, the snorts of pigs, and the lowing of cows, a cacophony harmonizing with the gentle rustle of wind through the nearby pines. Breeds like the Norwegian fjord horse, stocky and strong, stood ready to assist in the grueling tasks of plowing and transporting goods. They had become a lifeline, turning the harsh landscape into something bountiful. Their hooves left imprints in the frost, reminders of their vital role in the daily rhythms of Viking life. As the woman stood, she caught sight of her children, their laughter ringing out as they chased one another, weaving through the rows of sprouting greens. They were the future, and in their carefree joy, she found her own strength. But did they understand the weight of their inheritance? The responsibility to uphold the legacies of their forebears? To cultivate the land with respect and gratitude? She turned back to her work, planting seeds that would soon stretch toward the sun, alongside turnips, oats, and rye, crops that had nourished generations before her. Each seed represented countless meals and the hard labor of her ancestors who had toiled under the relentless sun and biting cold. Yet, as she planted, a shiver ran down her spine. The winter had been particularly cruel this year, and she felt a tightening in her chest, an unshakable tension that whispered of uncertainty. What if the harvest this year failed? What if the gods turned their backs, leaving them hungry and desperate? The thought gnawed at her, as unsettling as the chill creeping back into the air. She took a deep breath, the acrid scent of smoke from the distant fire mixing with the earthy aroma of damp soil, grounding her in the present. But what lay ahead was shrouded in mystery, a treacherous path lined with hope and despair. As she glanced at her children, their laughter echoed in stark contrast to the thoughts swirling in her mind. Would joy and hunger coexist in this unforgiving world? The wind picked up, rustling through the fields as if it carried secrets, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. The crops were in the ground, but what awaited them in the seasons to come? The smoke from the cooking fires curled lazily into the crisp winter air, mingling with the scent of roasting meat and the tang of salt from the nearby fjord. In a modest longhouse, a woman named Astrid stood at a large stone hearth, her hands deftly kneading dough as the flickering torchlight danced over her features. The air was thick with purpose, an effort not just to fill bellies, but to weave together the very fabric of their survival. Around her, the other women moved with an unspoken rhythm, gathering herbs and roots from woven baskets, their hands stained with the earth's bounty. But what made these women the silent architects of Viking resilience? They were not just wives or daughters, but the backbone of the household economy, crafting and preserving food to withstand the long, harsh winters. Nearby, a girl of no more than 10 meticulously arranged dried fish, the aroma sharp and pungent, hanging from a wooden beam, her small fingers working as skillfully as the adults. The fish would serve as sustenance in the coming months, a testament to the foresight and resourcefulness of the women who prepared them. Astrid glanced outside, where the wind howled like an angry wolf, rattling the doors and threatening the very structure of their home. She could see the men preparing for the hunt, their breath visible in the chilling air, a stark contrast to the warm, dark interior they were leaving behind. She thought of Ragnar, her eldest son, and the initiation he faced. What if they return but not whole? She mused quietly, the question hanging in the air like the smoke that filled the room. With a swift motion, Astrid lifted a sharp knife inscribed with runes, its bone handle cool against her palm. She sliced through the dough with purpose, each cut a declaration of her will to keep her family nourished and thriving. Her heart beat in sync with the pulse of the fire, a steady reminder of the critical role she played. She knew that while the men might seek honor and glory on the battlefield, it was the women who ensured that the hearth remained a place of warmth and sustenance. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the earth, the atmosphere thickened with anticipation. The sounds of laughter and chatter filled the air, but beneath it all, a tension simmered. A shared understanding of the sacrifices they all made. The women exchanged glances filled with unspoken fears and hopes. Astrid's gaze returned to the door, and she felt a chill, not from the cold wind, but from the uncertainty of what awaited the men outside. In the dim glow of the hearth, the warmth felt fleeting, as if the very essence of their survival hung by a thread. Did they have enough to endure another winter? Or would the shadows creeping closer threaten everything they held dear? In the heart of the village, the air thrummed with muted reverence. Smoke spiraled from the hearth, curling like a thick snake into the low rafters, carrying with it the rich aroma of roasted goat. A small gathering clustered around the crackling fire, shadows dancing on their faces, etched with the lines of hardship and hope. Outside, the world lay draped in a heavy blanket of snow, the biting chill pressing against the wooden walls. But inside, warmth and purpose embraced them. The flames flickered as if whispering secrets to the flickering shadows, and the villagers leaned closer, hungry not just for food, but for connection, an offering to both the living and the gods. At the center of it all, Astrid stood, her hands raised to the heavens, invoking the blessings of the deities. Odin, god of wisdom and war. Freya, goddess of love and fertility. Her voice flickered like the fire, gaining strength with each call. They believed that sharing food was more than survival. It was an act of communion, a bond woven between the community and the divine. Each meal was a chance to honor those who had gone before, to acknowledge the spirits that danced between the worlds of the living and the dead. The goat, an offering they had raised with care, was draped across the stone altar, its blood pooling into a shallow basin carved from ancient wood. It was more than just sustenance. This ritual was a promise. As Astrid poured the dark, glistening liquid upon the earth, she felt the weight of responsibility, a plea for protection against the cruel winter nights and the lurking specter of hunger. Will the gods hear us? She thought, her heart racing alongside the flames. The villagers murmured in agreement, their breath visible in the cold air, mingling with the smoke. Each word was an echo of the past, a way to keep their ancestors alive in spirit. They believed that to eat was to pay homage, to recognize the cycle of life and death that governed their existence. The sharp tang of pine resin from the torches mixed with the earthy scent of the sacrifice, creating an intoxicating blend that hung heavy over the gathering. As the first slices of meat were shared, laughter erupted alongside the solemnity, a reminder that even in the darkest of winters, joy could be found. They feasted not just to fill their bellies, but to stitch together the frayed edges of their spirit, to remind each other of their strength and unity. Yet, with each bite, a question lingered. What if the offerings failed? What if the harvests were poor and the long night swallowed them whole? The warmth of the fire was intoxicating, wrapping around them like a blanket, yet a thread of unease tugged at the edges of their joy. As Astrid took her seat among them, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath her, a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. What if the gods were watching, waiting to see who would falter first? The sun hung low over the fjord, casting long shadows that danced across the bustling marketplace of Birka, a key trading hub. Merchants shouted, their voices a symphony of languages, creating a kaleidoscope of sounds that merged with the scent of salted fish, smoked meats, and freshly baked bread. Here, Norsemen bartered not just goods, but flavors. Their iconic longships, sleek and resilient, had carved through the waters, connecting distant lands, and now the air thrummed with the promise of the exotic. A young woman, Sigrid, navigated the crowded stalls, her fingers brushing against the coarse wool of her cloak. She paused at a table laden with shimmering spices, black peppercorns from distant India, cumin seeds that spoke of the warm sun of the Mediterranean, and the earthy aroma of garlic that complemented the herring she'd brought to trade. But what made these flavors so irresistible? Was it merely the novelty or the deeper yearning for something beyond their cold, familiar diets? The exchange was not just about food. It was about survival, adaptation. Sigrid's father had once recounted tales of the harsh winters, when even the most inventive Norse cooks struggled against the monotony of their meals, fermented fish, dried meat, and barley porridge. But now, as she stood amidst the bounty of what other cultures offered, she felt the weight of possibility. What if they could transform their diet? What if new ingredients could stave off scurvy, a disease lurking in the shadows, waiting to take hold during the long months of endless snow? One stall boasted vibrant, deep red beets, their color a stark contrast against the grays of the winter landscape. Sigrid's heart raced. With these, she could create a dish that was not only nourishing, but vibrant. A burst of color in the otherwise muted palette of Viking fare. She exchanged her fish for a small sack of beets and a handful of garlic. The joyful realization that her family's meals could evolve with the changing tastes of the world flooding her thoughts. As she walked away, clutching her treasures, she couldn't help but wonder, would these new flavors bring joy or complicate their simple way of life? After all, with every new taste came the risk of forgetting the old. A sudden gust of wind swept through the market, sweeping away the sounds of laughter and bargaining, leaving Sigrid staring into the distance, her heart racing with anticipation and trepidation. Trade was not merely a transaction. It was a doorway to the unknown, and she was stepping through, unaware of what awaited her on the other side. As the frost began to melt from the fields, a pregnant stillness hung over the Viking settlement. The sun, a reluctant visitor in the cold months, now crested the horizon with a soft orange glow, teasing the promise of warmth. But the land bore scars, deep and telling. In the heart of the village, Thorvald knelt, hands caked with the damp earth, trying to cultivate what little crop remained. Each year, it seemed, the harvest grew thinner, a direct response to the capricious mood swings of the climate. Could it be that the gods themselves were angry? Rivers, once swollen with life, lay cracked under the relentless grip of a changing climate. The harsh winters had grown longer, and the summers shorter, like a cruel joke played by an invisible hand. Every year, the average temperature dipped, leaving farmers to wonder if they were fighting a battle they could never win. The nearby fjord, a once bountiful source of fish, had also begun to reflect the struggles of the land. Fish stocks dwindled as the waters cooled, making each catch harder to come by, like grasping at mist. The community gathered around a flickering fire, the acrid scent of burning pine filling the air. Elders exchanged worried glances, voices hushed as they spoke of the past. "You remember the warmth?" one pointedly asked, recalling a time when crops flourished and livestock thrived, even in the depths of winter. It felt like a forgotten dream, a whisper of what once was, and what had changed so drastically in the span of a few generations. The earth, it seemed, had turned against them. Thorvald finished his toil for the day, sweat mingling with the chill of the air as he stood, surveying the fields. The distant hills loomed, shadowed by a haze of uncertainty. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something monumental, an impending collapse, or perhaps a new beginning. But the question lingered, heavy as the dark clouds that often rolled in. What would happen to the clan if the last remnants of their harvest turned to dust? He turned back toward the settlement, where laughter and the music of children offered a stark contrast to his concern. For now, life persevered, but the whispers of dwindling food supplies echoed in the silence that followed. Would they endure, or would the gods' wrath finally come home to roost? As he stepped inside, the warmth enveloped him, but it felt fragile, like a candle threatened by an angry wind. Would their strength be enough to weather the storm? In the dim light of a longhouse, the air thick with the acrid scent of burning pine, and the warmth of the fire flickering against weathered wooden beams, an elder woman grinds dried herbs with a mortar and pestle. Each strike resonates like a heartbeat, punctuating the low murmur of family gathered around the hearth. They often spoke of their diet, the hearty stews and freshly caught fish, but little was said of the struggles lurking behind each meal. The truth was, the Viking diet, while diverse, brought with it an array of ailments that danced just out of the reach of the firelight. Is it any wonder that a people accustomed to the ferocity of the North endured a battle with their own bodies? With winters stretching from October to May, the cold made every footstep feel like a leap into a frozen abyss. Their staple foods, barley, oats, and fish, provided essential sustenance, yet many suffered from a lack of certain vitamins, particularly vitamin D, which made the long, dark months feel even bleaker. Rickets in children and brittle bones in the elderly were not considered weaknesses, but rather a testament to survival. With a hint of anxiety in her eyes, the elder carefully selects a few sprigs of yarrow, her fingers weathered and strong, and adds them to the mixture. Yarrow, a common remedy known to reduce fevers and inflammation, became a crucial ally in their unending struggle against sickness. She knew, deep in her bones, the power of these ancient herbs, but she also knew the limitations of their reach. How many times had she watched her kin suffer, unable to turn the tide of illness with mere plants? They had no doctors, no sterile instruments, just the wisdom passed down through generations and the blood they shared. As the evening deepens, the family shares stories of those who succumbed to ailments, fevers that came like wolves in the night, snatching away the young and the old with equal ferocity. What did it mean to fight against something so intangible? Something that lay coiled within their very cores? The laughter that once echoed throughout the longhouse dims, replaced by the weight of loss and the knowledge that health was as precarious as the ice adorning the fjords. In this fragile moment, she raises her voice, reminding them of the strength drawn from both the earth and each other. We are warriors, not just of the sword, but of the spirit, she asserts. And though doubt lingers like smoke in the air, her conviction ignites a spark among them. Outside, the wind howls, a reminder that the battle for life was never easy, but within these walls, they would fortify their bodies and souls against whatever came next. Yet, as the last embers of the fire flicker out, an unsettling thought lingers. What would happen when the remedies fell short, and their unrelenting bodies turned against them? The longhouse hummed with energy as torches cast flickering shadows upon the rough-hewn walls. Imagine this: the scent of roasted meat mingled with the earthy aroma of freshly turned soil, enveloping everyone within its embrace. A communal table stretched the length of the hall, laden with bowls of barley porridge and platters of fish, their scales glimmering like the icy fjords just outside. The warriors, their armor laid aside for the evening, laughed and recounted tales from the day's hunt, their voices rising above the crackling of the fire. They didn't call it mere sustenance. They called it a lifeblood. But what was a feast without its stories? Each mouthful of succulent lamb or tender hare was accompanied by a saga of gods and giants, of blood oaths and battles won. As the mead flowed in wooden tankards, men and women alike leaned closer, eyes sparkling with the warmth of camaraderie. The laughter of children scampered through the air like a melody, a reminder that survival wasn't only about food, it was about community. In this world of biting cold and uncertainty, the feasting table stood as a beacon, a place where alliances were forged and grievances forgotten, if only for a moment. As the evening wore on, the elder spoke, his voice gravelly but steady, weaving a tale that had been passed down through generations. Around him, the flicker of torchlight illuminated their rapt faces, each filled with expectation. Would tonight's story end in triumph or tragedy? The walls of the longhouse, covered with intricate carvings of mythical beasts and heroic figures, bore witness to the joy and sorrow that lived within. The rhythm of the feast, serving, sharing, laughter, was an ancient dance, one that bound them as tightly as the ropes of the longships that made their journeys across the sea. It was no longer just about eating. It was about belonging, about finding strength in unity. But as the last piece of roasted boar was divided among the guests, a weight hung in the air. Could the bonds forged over fire and food really withstand the harshness of the winter that loomed just outside? Outside, the wind howled a chilling reminder of their vulnerability. But inside, they toasted to the brighter days ahead. Yet, as the flames flickered higher, illuminating the faces of friends and family, a shadow danced in the corner of the room, unseen and uninvited. In the flickering shadows of feasting and laughter, the unspoken question lingered. How long could this warmth last before the cold reality returned? In the blood-soaked twilight, the scent of smoke and salt filled the air as warriors lined the beach, their eyes scanning the horizon. A longship, sleek and dark like a predator, sliced through the waves, its dragon-headed prow cutting a fierce silhouette against the fading sun. The crew, hardened by countless raids, prepared for the onslaught, both against their foes and the elements that sought to reclaim the land. With every raid, their lives intertwined with survival, knowing that what lay before them was not just riches, but the very sustenance they would need to endure the harsh winter. But what could they seize tonight that would keep their families fed? The Viking diet was not just a matter of taste. It was a reflection of their brutal, nomadic existence. As the men disembarked, they carried with them not just weapons, but woven baskets filled with dried fish and grains, remnants of previous conquests. These humble rations, carefully preserved, would sustain them during the long, dark months when the cold gnawed at their bones. Gathering what they could from the spoils of raiding monasteries and coastal villages, they added new flavors to their diet, spices from far-off lands like the pepper and saffron that clung to their plundered treasures. The more they conquered, the more diverse their menu became, evolving from simple, rough-hewn bread to sumptuous stews infused with exotic flavors. But the thrill of survival in such treacherous waters came with a price. As they filled their nets with fish at dusk or harvested wild berries in the clearing, they knew the specter of famine loomed closer than any enemy. With a harsh winter approaching, they had learned to make their forays count. Each successful raid brought not just food, but the chance to forge alliances, trading their hard-earned goods for the necessities to withstand the brutal Scandinavian winters. The spoils were a lifeline, a reminder that their existence relied on the precarious balance between aggression and diplomacy. The laughter of the men carried over the surf as they prepared a feast, their faces illuminated by the flickering torchlight and the warmth of a crackling fire. Their bellies, full with the fruits of their labor, sang of victory. Yet the shadows danced with the memory of those who had fallen, the ones who had not returned from the frozen depths. They would always honor their sacrifice, but the reality of mortality weighed heavily on the hearts of these warriors. What would the price of their next raid be? As the last embers faded, the night air turned colder, and the warriors cast uneasy glances toward the horizon. The vibrant colors of their feast turned dull in the encroaching darkness, shadowed by the uncertainty of what lay ahead. They fought not only for glory, but for survival, knowing that the next raid could bring either bounteous blessings or devastating loss. Would the next tide bring prosperity or peril? Previously on, the Vikings embraced the harsh realities of their environment, forging a deep connection with nature through survival and ritual. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain, a group of Vikings gathered around a fire, the acrid scent of burning pine resin mingling with the smoke of dried fish sizzling over the flames. This wasn't just dinner. It was storytelling time, a sacred ritual where myths intertwined with the very fabric of their daily existence. The flickering light illuminated the faces of warriors and women alike, all drawn in by the magnetic pull of ancient tales that connected them to the land and sea. Do you think Odin ever worried about his next meal? One of the younger men teased, prompting laughter that echoed through the cold air. But the question hung heavier than the weight of their great, weathered axes. What if the gods themselves struggled against hunger? The Norse pantheon was rich with stories of trials and tribulations tied to the very elements they faced daily. The biting cold, the harsh winters, the scarcity of food. As the elders spoke of Yggdrasil, the world tree that linked all 9 realms, there was a palpable reverence for the interconnectedness of life. They believed that every beast hunted, every crop harvested, was part of a greater narrative, a dance with nature that demanded respect. When they feasted on a freshly caught salmon, it wasn't merely sustenance, it was a tribute to Njord, the god of the sea. They honored him with words as they consumed the fruits of his domain, infusing their meals with an almost sacred significance. In their minds, every bite was a pact, an acknowledgement of the delicate balance between man and nature. The legends weren't just stories, they were guidelines. They taught the importance of gratitude, how to give back to the earth through careful foraging and sustainable hunting practices, ensuring that the land would provide for generations to come. Each feast echoed the age-old belief that the act of eating was not just about survival, but about communion with the world around them. As the fire crackled, a chill breeze swept through the gathering, and the shadows seemed to twist like the tales being spun. Yet beneath the surface of laughter and camaraderie, an unspoken truth lingered. Could they ever truly appease the whims of the gods? Or would hunger always be a lurking beast in the shadows of their existence? And as the last embers glowed dimly, the air thick with the weight of unfulfilled promises, the question remained: was it the gods they feared most, or the depths of their own hunger? Block goal. Delve into the ways Viking culinary traditions have shaped contemporary Scandinavian cuisine, while exploring the emotional resonance of these practices. Include one rhetorical question and at least one concrete detail from the Viking period. A dining table stretches long into the distance, set against the backdrop of a Nordic winter evening. Candlelight flickers, casting shadows that dance like the specters of long-forgotten feasts. A young chef, apron dusted with flour, plates a dish inspired by ancient recipes passed down through generations. The scent of roasted roots, beets and carrots perhaps, mingles with fresh dill, reminiscent of Viking longhouses where such meals once nourished warriors and families alike. But how often do we pause to consider the flavors of our ancestors that linger in our kitchens today? The chef's hands work with precision, crafting a meal that echoes the past. He recalls the texts from sagas describing how Viking women would boil grains in large cauldrons, enriching the broth with whatever proteins they could find: fish, game, or even foraged mushrooms. In the dim light of the rustic kitchen, the chef slices a piece of smoked herring, its scent rich and briny, a direct nod to the preservation methods of the Norse. For them, survival relied on ingenuity and the seasons, a dance with nature that extends into modern practices of sustainability. As the chef garnishes the plate with wildflowers, in homage to the vibrant landscapes they once roamed, he reflects on the diverse ingredients that compose his menu. Fermented foods, such as pickled cabbage and berries, can trace their roots back to the Viking Age, where such methods were essential for survival in a harsh climate. The act of preserving food wasn't merely a culinary choice. It was a way of life, a testament to resilience. But what would the Vikings think of this modern culinary art form, where flavors are reimagined but the essence remains unchanged? The dining room fills with guests, each one a connoisseur of the new Scandinavian cuisine, unaware that their enjoyment stems from ancient practices that once held communities together. They share stories over the table, laughter intertwining with the aroma of a stew that simmers with spices brought from distant lands, reflecting the Viking spirit of exploration. Yet, as they relish the meal, an unspoken bond forms, connecting them to a lineage of people who once braved the seas for the very sustenance they now enjoy. Outside, the wind howls, swirling with the remembrance of those who first cultivated these flavors. The chef pauses, knife poised above a fresh loaf of rye bread, wondering if these culinary legacies will endure through the ages. With every bite, they are not just tasting food, but history itself. And as the evening deepens, a chilling thought settles in. What legacy will they leave behind in the relentless march of time? As the sun dipped below the mountain range, casting long shadows over the village, the air turned crisp, heavy with the scent of wood smoke and pine resin. The local historian, wrapped in a thick wool cloak and cradling a bone-handled knife that had once belonged to a chieftain, spoke to a gathering of modern-day settlers. "We look to the past," he said, his voice steady against the whispering wind, "to carve out a future." Beneath the flickering light of pine resin torches, the audience leaned in, captivated by the rugged resilience of the Vikings. The historian's words painted vivid images of a time when survival meant more than just food or shelter. It was an intricate dance of cooperation and cunning. The Vikings had thrived without doctors or modern medicine, relying instead on their keen understanding of the natural world. They foraged for herbs that could staunch bleeding, crafted remedies from honey and garlic, and relied on the collective wisdom of their elders. What would our lives look like if we embraced such ancient knowledge in the modern age? He mused, raising an eyebrow for emphasis. He shared stories of the harsh winters when the temperature could plummet to 20 degrees, and families would gather around the hearth, sharing whatever they had, be it dried fish or fermented cabbage, a testament to their ability to adapt. Their survival hinged not just on individual strength, but on the bonds formed through shared hardship. The historian gestured to the audience, encouraging them to see that modern society, often disconnected and digitally tethered, could learn from the Vikings' deep sense of community. With each anecdote, he collected nods and murmurs from the crowd, the flickering flames reflecting in their wide eyes. He spoke of the Vikings' adaptability, their innovation in shipbuilding that allowed them to traverse vast oceans, and how their willingness to embrace the unknown forged an empire. In a world of uncertainties, how often do we choose fear over exploration? He challenged gently, as if igniting a spark in his listeners. As the evening wore on and the stars blinked into existence overhead, he concluded with this thought. Survival isn't just about enduring. It's about thriving together. With a final glance at the gathering, he let the weight of history hang in the air, an invitation to reflect. The crowd remained silent, contemplating the lessons etched in time, the flickering torchlight illuminating the path forward. But as the last ember faded, did they truly understand what it meant to embrace both the past and the future? The question lingered, unanswered, hanging like a winter fog. The night was thick with potential, and they, unaware of what tomorrow would reveal, left with a sense of both duty and uncertainty. The sky hung low with a shroud of gray, the sun a mere rumor in the frozen expanse of Viking Scandinavia. Imagine this. A landscape stripped bare, where the wind howled like a banshee, slicing through the air with a bone-deep chill that gnawed at the skin. Pine trees huddled together, their branches heavy with frost, bent low under the weight of the unrelenting winter. The ground lay blanketed in a thick layer of snow, the kind that swallowed sound and rendered the world eerily silent, save for the occasional crack of ice shifting beneath the weight of the cold. In this realm, survival was a daily negotiation with the elements. A young boy, no more than 10 winters old, trudged through the snow, his breath rising in clouds of vapor. He was drawn to the hearth fire, where the acrid scent of burning wood mingled with the faint sweetness of dried berries, remnants of the last summer's harvest. He could almost taste the warmth of the roasted meat his mother prepared, a rare but cherished luxury in their diet, which often consisted of dried fish and root vegetables. If the gods smiled, they might feast on herring caught in the icy waters that bordered their village. But how long could they endure without fresh supplies? The villagers had long learned that the jagged cliffs and treacherous fjords concealed more than just beauty. They were a reminder of mortality, where the average life expectancy barely touched 40. In winter, the night stretched long, and each dawn was a gamble against starvation. They relied on what the land offered, game and fish, supplemented by whatever they could forage. And while the people believed in the strength of community, the reality was a grim one. As many as 1 in 5 children wouldn't survive to see their 15th winter. The risks of sickness, injury, and hunger loomed large. Yet even in such bleakness, the will to endure thrived. The elders spoke of healing with herbs. The stinging nettle and yarrow grew wild, offering fleeting relief. They knew the secrets of the land, the rhythms of the seasons, how to make the most of what was given. But in the stillness, as the boy gazed at the swirling snowflakes, he wondered, what if the earth turned against them? As he moved closer to the warmth of the fire, his heart raced at the thought of the next journey into the dark forest, where the trees whispered secrets of survival. If you dared to listen, would the risks be worth the rewards? And what wisdom would he gain from the wild? But as the flames flickered and danced, the shadows of uncertainty loomed larger than the warmth they promised. Would he return from the hunt, or would the frost claim him first? Block goal. Explore the significance of diet in Viking culture, emphasizing the types of food they relied on for sustenance, while setting a tense, immersive scene. In the flickering glow of a pine resin torch, a longhouse bustles with the hum of activity. The scent of salt and smoke hangs heavy in the air as women deftly prepare the evening meal, their strong hands kneading coarse rye flour into thick, hearty loaves. Outside, the world is blanketed in snow, the January chill biting deeper than the frost on their breath. Each member of the clan knows the weight of sustenance, both in body and spirit. Their survival depends on it, just as surely as their willingness to endure hardship defines their honor. Imagine this. The oldest woman in the tribe murmurs, grinding herbs with a stone pestle. A meal rich in flavor, but also memory. Her words echo the essence of Viking culture, a blend of practicality and reverence. For them, food is more than mere fuel. It's a connection to the land, to their ancestors, and to the very rhythm of life that governs their existence. Grains, legumes, and fish compose the backbone of their diet, while wild game offers the occasional reprieve from routine, a promise of something special on a day that feels endless. But what if there was more to this sustenance than mere survival? The fire crackles, smoke curling into the air, and the warriors gather, their backs straightening and eyes glimmering with unspoken camaraderie. They feast on dried herring, the saltiness awakening longings for summer tides, paired with a robust porridge simmering with root vegetables. Turnips, onions, whatever the earth can yield. Each bite carries a narrative, a whispered story of resilience and hardship. Every morsel reinforces their grit, cultivates a camaraderie rooted in shared struggle. In the corner, a young boy watches, mouth watering but hands clenched against his sides. He dreams of the day he'll sit among them, carving his piece of the communal loaf as the shadows dance around him like the spirits of those who came before. But the food symbolizes more than mere nourishment. It embodies a covenant with the cold, harsh landscape of Scandinavia, a promise that they will not be defeated by the elements. As laughter erupts around him, he can't help but wonder, how much longer would he be an outsider, a mere observer in this world of strength? When the meal is done, the fire's last embers flicker, and a cold wind howls outside. Hope mingles with fear. Each day brings him closer to his initiation. But will he be strong enough to face whatever lies beyond the threshold? The longhouse feels like both a refuge and a prison. And as the last scraps of food vanish, he realizes he is still hungry. For acceptance, for belonging, for the strength to survive. A girl, no older than 12, crouches in the underbrush, her breath fogging in the cold air. The dense woods near her small settlement are alive with the sounds of winter's muted rustle. Branches creaking under the weight of snow, the faint scurry of a hare. For her, survival means embracing the rhythms of the land. Every rustle whispers of opportunity. She grips a bone-handled knife, its runes worn by generations of use, and inches forward, eyes sharp like the knife's edge. Hunting wasn't just a skill. It was the lifeblood of her people. She glances up, scanning the treetops where the pines stand sentinel against the slate sky. How could she translate this observation into a successful hunt? The elders had taught her to listen, to understand the patterns of the forest. The hares would be feeding early, drawn out by the dawn light. Gathering the courage that swells in her chest, she inhales the sharp, acrid scent of pine resin, a reminder that this world, harsh as it is, also provides. Winter had transformed the landscape into a frozen maze, yet the Vikings had mastered it through keen observation and an intimate connection to their environment. They hunted using snares, simple traps made from branches and sinew, or with wooden bows that echoed their strength. A successful hunt could mean the difference between life and starvation, between gathering around a warm fire or being huddled in despair. But what if the game eluded them, slipping through their fingers like smoke? With a sudden rustle, the girl's attention snaps back as a flash of brown darts past her. A hare. Heart racing, she springs into action, muscles taut. The world blurs around her, the chill forgotten as instinct takes over. She lunges, craving the successful strike that would not only ensure her survival, but also validate her place in the clan, a testament to her strength. The knife glints in the weak light. She feels the earth beneath her, damp with the thawed remnants of autumn, the promise of sustenance mingling with desperation. Victory would taste sweet, yet there was always the risk lurking in the shadows. Loss, failure, and the bitter chill of an empty belly. And just as she lunges forward, a snap echoes through the trees, a warning call that sends a chill down her spine. Was it the hare, or something more dangerous lurking nearby? The girl freezes, poised between triumph and uncertainty, her heart pounding as she grapples with the unknown. In the pale light of dawn, the village bustled with the urgency of survival. Gnarled hands worked expertly, moving like clockwork as they prepared for the inevitable winter. A woman knelt beside a wooden table, her fingers deftly slicing strips of fish, the scent of the sea lingering in the air. Outside, the sky loomed in shades of slate gray, heavy with the promise of snow. What was she thinking as she cut, the sharp blade gleaming like a promise of life? Nearby, smoke curled from a low stone hearth, an acrid scent mixing with the tang of salted fish. The villagers had learned to harness the elements, using smoke not just for flavor, but as a preservation technique, a lifeline against the encroaching winter. Smoke drying was more than a culinary choice. It was a vital survival strategy. The fish transformed into jerky, the texture firm yet fragile, a testament to the craftsmanship born of necessity. A man moved in with a wooden crate, its contents lined with layers of dried herbs, roots, and foraged greens. The air around him was heavy with the earthy perfume of thyme and wild garlic, a reminder that life thrived even in the harshest conditions. Fermenting was another art form, an ancient alchemy that turned simple vegetables into tangy treasures. A batch of sauerkraut bubbled in a clay pot, creating a symphony of flavors that would sustain them through the darkest days. How much could a single jar of fermented cabbage mean in the face of hunger? As the villagers worked, laughter bubbled amidst the tension, the lightness a counterbalance to the weight of their task. Yet behind each smile lay an understanding that food was more than sustenance. It was a communal bond, a way to share stories and survival strategies in a world where help was scarce and death could be as close as the frost on the ground. Every preserved morsel was a promise, a pact with the future. But as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted ground, the remnants of yesterday's harvest felt fleeting. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and the question lingered like the smoke in the air. Would they be enough to fend off the hunger that always lurked in the corners of their lives? The woman glanced at the hearth, her heart heavy. The preserved jars lined the shelves like sentinels. But would they be enough when the dark months stretched on? And as the first snowflakes began to fall, she wondered, could the bounty of yesterday truly carry them through tomorrow's uncertainty? The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden hues over the hardy Scandinavian landscape. A farmer knelt in the frost-tinged grass, a bleeding goat tethered by a simple leather cord, its nose nuzzling at his worn leather boot. The goat, like a steadfast companion, reminded him of the fleeting warmth of summer, when the fields flourished with grass and the promise of fresh milk filled the air. This was no ordinary morning. It was a ritual that merged livelihood with survival, where each animal told a story of resilience. But what lay behind the serene image of livestock grazing in the meadows? Cattle, sheep, and goats were not just animals roaming the hills. They were lifelines for the Norse people. The sturdy cattle provided rich milk, which could be churned into butter or fermented into tangy cheese to last through the long, harsh winters. The sheep, with their thick, woolly coats, offered warmth in the bitter cold, their meat an essential source of sustenance during food shortages. Goats, hardy and resourceful, offered versatility, milk, meat, and even companionship. As the farmer watched the goat munch on sparse tufts of grass, he couldn't help but ponder. How did they manage to thrive in a land so unforgiving? Around him, the air was filled with the acrid scent of firewood burning, a reminder of the evenings spent gathered around flickering flames, sharing stories of valor and the day's toil. Behind every bite of roasted lamb or a bowl of hearty stew, there was a story of sacrifice, a delicate balance between the needs of the tribe and the resources offered by their livestock. A bone-handled knife glinted in his pocket, a reminder that every meal required effort, and the price of survival was often steep. As the sun dipped lower, casting shadows that twisted like ancient runes across the ground, the farmer felt a growing tension in his chest. The livestock were not merely commodities. They were intertwined with the very essence of Viking life. And yet, with winter looming and dwindling resources, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that the fragile harmony they relied upon could shatter in an instant. With a final glance at the goats, he straightened, swallowing hard against the uncertainty ahead. What if the animals fell ill or the grass didn't grow? The weight of his ancestors pressed down on him as he turned to head back inside. He didn't realize just how close they were to the edge of desperation. The warmth of the hearth beckoned, but the chill creeping in reminded him that survival wasn't guaranteed. He stepped back into the shelter, the wooden door creaking ominously behind him. The shadows danced on the walls, whispering secrets he was too afraid to hear. And as he took a deep breath, the taste of smoke and uncertainty filled his lungs. What awaited them when the snow blanketed the land once more? The frost-bitten dawn broke over the fjord, a shimmering expanse of blue and gray, as the old fishing boats rocked gently in the icy current. The air was thick with the acrid scent of brine, a bitter reminder of the relentless sea that both nurtured and threatened them. A man, broad-shouldered and weathered by years of battling the elements, stepped onto the slats of his vessel, a bone-handled knife glinting at his hip, etched with runes from ages past. This was not merely a means to catch fish. It was a tradition, a lifeline woven into the very fabric of their existence. With deft hands, he cast his net into the water, the mesh splashing like a whispered promise. The Vikings had mastered various techniques, from traps and lines to the widespread use of nets. They were adept at reading the rhythms of the tides and the dance of the fish below. Cod, herring, and the ever-elusive salmon were staples, rich in protein, essential for a people who faced winter's merciless grasp. They knew the best fishing grounds, areas where the currents converged, stirring up life beneath the surface. But what made these warriors so unwavering in their pursuit of sustenance? Even when nature's chaos threatened to pull them under, the man's breath hung in the air like a frosty ghost, mingling with the scent of wood smoke from nearby longhouses. He glanced toward the jagged cliffs, where the cries of seabirds echoed, and felt the world narrow down to the ripples in front of him, each one a reminder of the fine line between survival and despair. The net tugged suddenly, a sign of life, the thrill coursing through him as he braced himself. This wasn't just a catch, it was hope, a momentary escape from the endless cycle of struggle that defined their lives. As he pulled the net aboard, glistening with the promise of the day's labor, he couldn't help but feel the weight of expectation. Others depended on him. On this catch, the women would dry the fish, preserving it for the lean months ahead. Children would listen wide-eyed as the elders spoke of the great sea monsters lurking just out of sight, their imaginations as vibrant as the colorful fish they pulled from the depths. But as he prepared to haul his bounty, a chill sliced through him, sharper than the cold water against his skin. What if today's catch was not enough? What if the tides turned against him? A sudden splash broke his reverie, a glimpse of a much larger shadow darting beneath the waves. There was a stirring in the depths, a reminder that the ocean held secrets they may never know. He tightened his grip on the net, heart pounding, and felt the weight of uncertainty settle in his gut like a stone. Would he return to shore with enough to feed his family, or would today mark the beginning of a deeper hunger? In the dim light of a flickering pine resin torch, Gudrun knelt on the frost-bitten earth, her fingers buried in the soil. The acrid scent of burning wood mixed with the sharp tang of winter air, creating a pungent reminder that the cold months only deepened the hunger lurking in their bellies. Around her, the talking and laughter of children echoed faintly, a counterpoint to the stark landscape outside. A pack of boys, hardened by years of training, took pride in chasing each other through the snow, their laughter a thin veil over the ever-looming specter of survival. But for Gudrun, the real work lay before her. What did it mean to keep a family thriving in times when the harsh winter winds could just as easily blow away your existence? She dug deeper, searching for tubers that would rise from the cold, dark earth like forgotten treasures. Potatoes and turnips had been nearly exhausted by the relentless voracity of the Viking appetite, but even the smallest roots could feed a mouth or two. Each time her fingers grazed the frozen ground, she felt the weight of her family resting upon her shoulders. As she gathered, Gudrun could hear the distant thrum of her husband's axe, the sound striking wood like a heartbeat. It was a rhythm she had come to rely on, the steady pulse of daily survival. The firewood he chopped this morning would fuel their hearth, the lifeblood of warmth and nourishment in a home that felt increasingly fragile. But she knew the balance of survival was delicate. Too little food, and the family would suffer. Too much reliance on her husband's hunting, and they might find themselves at the mercy of the wilderness. This was not just about gathering roots and herbs. It was about sustaining the very fabric of their household. It was Gudrun's hands that kneaded the coarse barley into bread, her knowledge that turned the wild herbs into remedies, her prowess that brought flavor to the harsh, repetitive meals that filled their bellies, each morsel a testament to her labor. But even with her heart full of determination, did anyone truly recognize the strength it took for her to stand against the storm? As dusk began to settle, shadows crawled over the ground like creeping dread. Gudrun sensed the weight of expectation in the air. The men would return soon, and with them, the question of their success in the hunt. Would they bring back enough meat to last the week? Or would she be left scouring the land for whatever scraps remained? The uncertainty gnawed at her like a hungry wolf. And so, as she pulled the last of the crude roots from the earth, she knew that her work wasn't merely about feeding mouths. It was about fortifying lives against the inevitable ravages of winter. But what if the resources ran out? What if they couldn't survive the next frost? With the last light of day slipping away, Gudrun rose, her arms laden with the fruits of her labor. But her heart felt heavier than the roots she carried. She glanced toward the path leading back to their home, where shadows danced ominously, and the howls of the wind whispered secrets she dared not ponder. Would her efforts be enough to stave off the hunger that loomed like a predator just beyond sight? The fire crackled in the center of the longhouse, flames leaping like wild dancers in the shadows. A great wooden table, rough-hewn and smelling of pine resin, was laden with roasted venison, fruits of the harvest, and thick loaves of barley bread. The air thick with the mingling scents of meat and spices, which drifted like whispers among the gathered clansfolk, each face illuminated by flickering torchlight. This wasn't just dinner. It was a communal lifeline, a feast that bound the community together, and reinforced the very fabric of their existence. Bjorn sat squashed between his father, with scars etched like stories across his forearms, and his older sister, Ingunn, who rolled her eyes at his clumsiness as he fumbled with a bone-handled knife. They all knew the importance of feasting. It was a celebration of survival, a ritualistic nod to the gods, and an acknowledgement of the Earth's bounty. A chance to momentarily forget the toll of winter and the uncertainty of tomorrow. But what if the next storm took the harvest? What if the hunt failed? The weight of these questions hung in the air, dancing with the smoke as laughter erupted from the far end of the table. Old men recounted tales of glory and gods, while children darted around, eyes wide with dreams of raiding and adventure. The clink of horn cups filled with mead punctuated the stories like a heartbeat echoing through time. The bonds forged in such gatherings went beyond mere sustenance. They were imbued with purpose. Bjorn could feel the warmth of community wrapping around him, like a thick wool cloak against the chill. During these feasts, conflicts faded into the background, replaced by shared laughter and communal chants. The memories created here were like strands woven into a tapestry of identity, telling tales of ancestry, of battles fought, and of survival against the unforgiving elements. Each person played a part, whether by fostering camaraderie or sharing in the blessings of the harvest. As the evening deepened, the flames cast elongated shadows, and Bjorn's thoughts shifted. The festivities had an unspoken challenge: to carry the strength of this unity into the hardships that loomed ahead, to ensure that the feasts would not dwindle into mere memories. But as the last echo of laughter faded into the night, Bjorn found himself staring into the flickering flames, questioning whether the strength of their bonds would be enough to weather the storms yet to come. And when the time came to hunt for survival, would they remember the warmth of this moment, or would it vanish like smoke in the cold night air? In the heart of winter, when the air crackled with frost and the world lay untouched beneath a blanket of white, the hut's door creaked open. A woman stepped out, her breath clouding in the frigid air. She clutched a woven basket, its rough fibers biting into her palms, while snow crunched beneath her boots like brittle bones. The trees loomed tall and silent, their branches heavy with snow, as if nature itself wore a shroud of secrets. She was off to gather what she could before the biting cold claimed another day. The forest, both foreboding and beautiful, was a land of whispers. Here, amongst the towering pines and dense underbrush, resided a myriad of medicinal plants. She knelt beside a patch of stinging nettle, its green leaving an unmistakable mark against the white canvas of winter. The Viking knowledge of herbal remedies ran deep, a legacy passed from mother to daughter and woven into the very fabric of their existence. But what drove them to rely on the earth for healing, when the very gods seemed to conspire against them? With careful fingers, she plucked the leaves and dropped them into her basket, visualizing how they would be brewed into a tea. Nettle was a treasure, a harbinger of iron that could stave off fatigue and replenish courage. It was said to help with everything from aches to the iron grip of fever, an ancient remedy for an unforgiving world. The woman's mind wandered to her ailing child, nestled beneath furs, eyes fever-bright and cheeks flushed. Could this humble plant turn the tide? Or was it merely a fool's hope? In the distance, she noticed a flash of red, a cluster of berries peeking through the snow. Her pulse quickened. These were not just any berries. They were the prized bilberries, their rich, dark hue a promise of courage for the weary heart. She recalled the stories of warriors who had consumed them before battle, as if the very juice coursed through their veins, igniting their spirits. The threats they faced were often invisible, lurking like shadows, and these simple offerings from the earth were their only defense. The wind picked up, a biting reminder of the struggle that lay ahead, gathering enough herbs and roots to face yet another day without modern medicine. She glanced back toward the hut, the warmth emanating from within like a beacon, but it felt distant and cold. The weight of survival pressed down on her, thick as the snow around her, with each leaf she plucked feeling like a gamble against fate. The thought lingered as she gathered the last of her treasured finds. What if this was not enough? What if nature's bounty failed her when she needed it most? As the final sunlight faded behind the trees, she stood, her basket heavy with hope and fear intertwined. She turned back toward the hut, but the growing shadows whispered of uncertainty. Would she find warmth inside, or only the echoes of despair? In a landscape once lush and teeming with life, the air now hung heavy with an ominous chill. The sky roiled with slate-gray clouds, and as the wind howled through the fjords, it carried whispers of an impending winter that felt more brutal than any before. The sun's rays struggled to break through, slanting coldly like the edge of a bone-handled knife against the fragile, frost-bitten crops. Years of bountiful harvests had given way to barren fields, and the people of the north faced a reckoning. How could the sons and daughters of Odin survive when the very earth beneath their feet turned hostile? Freya's gold, the bountiful grains that once filled their longhouses, had dwindled with each passing season. The Vikings, ever resourceful, turned to their ancient knowledge and the shifting patterns of the world around them. They began to forage not just for grains, but for wild roots and berries, their fingers numb with cold as they unearthed what sustenance the soil still held. The acrid scent of pine resin torches lit their way as they scoured the shadowy woods, and the crunch of frost underfoot echoed like a warning. Their cattle, once thriving under the watchful eye of a warm sun, became leaner, struggling against the hunger that gnawed at their bellies. The massive beasts wandered listlessly, their low moos a haunting lament against the backdrop of a relentless winter. The Vikings adapted, turning to the sea, churning their small longships through icy waters to fish, their breath clouding in the frigid air. What had once been a source of bounty became a gamble. How many sailors would return with enough to feed the clan? As the months dragged on, desperation crept into their hearts, like a fog rolling in from the fjords. The elders spoke of ancient prophecies. Perhaps the gods had turned their backs on them. The whispers of the ancestors echoed in their minds. Would a harsh winter lead to a new beginning, or would it seal their fate? The women gathered around fires, preparing sour porridge with the last of their dwindling supplies, their eyes filled with fear but resolute in duty. Yet, with every passing day, the question loomed larger. How long could they endure this cruel twist of fate? When the frost finally broke, would they find restoration? Or had the gods of winter truly claimed their sacrifice? The chill gripped them, sharper than any axe, and the shadows of uncertainty loomed larger than the darkest night. As the winds howled outside their longhouses, they sat together in silence, fingers clenched around bone knives, ready for whatever would come next, whether it be hope or despair. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an amber glow over the bustling port of Hedeby, traders moved like shadows, their voices rising and falling like the tide. A longship bobbed in the water, its dragon-headed prow gleaming under the last rays of light. The acrid scent of smoked fish mingled with the earthy aroma of freshly baked bread wafting from nearby stalls, luring hungry passers-by. Each exchange held the promise of survival, a lifeline woven from the threads of necessity and ambition. The marketplace pulsed with life. Norsemen bartered with Slavic traders, their tongues a melodic clash of languages that flowed like the rivers they navigated. A man, his rough-hewn hands cradling a bone-handled knife adorned with intricate runes, negotiated for a sack of grains, his brow furrowed in concentration. His heart raced not just for the food, but for the stories that traveled with the spices and silks of distant lands. What hidden knowledge lay beyond the fjords, waiting for those daring enough to seek it? Little did he know that each transaction held risks as palpable as the biting winter winds that blew down from the north. With every grain of barley exchanged, there was a chance of betrayal, of deceit lurking behind a friendly smile. But desperation drove them forward, a force more potent than the icy chill that gripped their bones. The Vikings were not just warriors, they were explorers, risk-takers, and merchants, driven by an insatiable hunger for both sustenance and discovery. Fish hung from wooden frames, their scales glistening like jewels under the fading sun, while traders from the east offered exotic fruits, soft figs and sugary dates, each bite a promise of warmth that the coming frost would render scarce. As the sun slipped away, the flicker of oil lamps ignited around the square, casting a warm glow that beckoned the weary. But beneath this veneer of camaraderie, shadows lurked. Whispers of rivalries and alliances shaped by necessity, yet fragile as the thin ice that coated the fjords in early spring. Hedeby thrummed with possibility. Yet, as they filled their bellies with foreign delights, did they realize the cost of their hunger? In a world where every trade could tip the balance between life and death, the Vikings navigated a treacherous dance of diplomacy and greed. Each deal they struck was more than just the exchange of goods. It was a gamble, a step along a path fraught with peril. As night descended, the vibrant energy of the market began to ebb, leaving behind a lingering question. In their quest for survival, how much of themselves were they willing to trade away? Shadows loomed over the stalls, and even as laughter echoed through the twilight, a cold truth slipped into their hearts, whispering of betrayals yet to come. Part 12. Myths and Beliefs. Previously on, the Viking warriors gathered for the feast, unaware of the deeper significance their food held beyond mere sustenance. The longhouse buzzed with the warmth of a flickering fire, its orange glow casting dancing shadows against the wooden beams, while the scent of roasted meat mingled with the acrid smell of burning pine resin. As they sat on rough-hewn benches, the Vikings dug into their feast, oblivious to the sacred rituals woven into every bite they took. They didn't merely eat, they honored the land and the gods who provided for them. What if the act of sharing their meal was, in fact, the highest tribute to the deities that governed their lives? Beside the hearth, an elder raised a bone-handled knife, its haft inscribed with runes, each mark a prayer to the goddess of the harvest, Sif. With a chiseled face lined by the harsh winters and a voice like gravel, he offered a blessing, his words heavy with tradition. May Freyr fill our granaries, and may Njord guide our ships to bountiful shores. The others joined him, their voices a low rumble, echoing the rhythms of the earth itself, as if their words wove a protective net around the longhouse. Food was more than a necessity. It was a bridge between the earthly and the divine. Each morsel consumed was a reminder of the sacrifices made in their favor. A moment where the mundane became sacred. The Vikings believed that the spirits of nature dwelled within the very grains and roots they harvested. A reminder that their survival was intertwined with the health of the land. The chill in the air whispered to them. A reminder that winter would soon return, and the land would sleep beneath a blanket of snow. But did these warriors know that respect for the earth was as vital as the sword at their side? As the meal continued, stories of valiant hunts and brave voyages flowed as freely as the mead, each tale a thread in the tapestry of their shared existence. The tales of Odin's wisdom and Loki's trickery filled the air, as vibrant and tangible as the food before them. Feasting was not just about filling their bellies, it was about nourishing their souls, binding them together in a web of shared history and collective belief. Yet, as the last drops of mead were poured, shadows began to creep in, thickening the air with an unsettled tension. What would happen when the winter winds blew too fiercely and the gods demanded payment for their bounty? The laughter faded, replaced by a silent understanding. Survival came at a cost, and the land would ask more than they were prepared to give. The fire crackled ominously, and for an instant, the flickering light revealed faces strained with uncertainty. What lay ahead, in the frostbite of winter, remained cloaked in shadow and fear. Would the favor of the gods hold? Or would they find themselves lost amid a world that demanded both loyalty and sacrifice? Block goal. Reflect on how Viking eating habits have influenced modern Scandinavian cuisine and cultural identity. Include a rhetorical question and concrete Viking period details. Under the soft glow of amber lights, a modern Scandinavian restaurant buzzed with low voices and laughter, the air thick with the scent of roasted root vegetables and smoked fish. A young couple shared a plate of gravlax, its salmon pink glistening like the fjords at dawn, while another table clinked glasses filled with aquavit, the sharpness of the spirit echoing ancient toasts made long ago. The restaurant, a tapestry of wood and stone, seemed to breathe history, and patrons reveled in the culinary legacy left by their Viking ancestors. But what had those long-ago warriors truly gifted to the present? As their descendants dined, the essence of Viking sustenance, simple yet hearty, lived on. The Vikings had thrived on fish, game, and foraged plants, their survival woven into the very fabric of their meals. Archaeological finds revealed remnants of dried cod and wild berries, both staples that still peppered contemporary Scandinavian diets. Around the restaurant, conversations flowed like mead at a longhouse feast. A chef recounted tales of his grandmother's recipes, inspired by Viking traditions, his hands animatedly describing how she would prepare herring with minerals from the sea, a method perfected over generations. Nearby, a group of friends laughed over a bowl of hearty barley soup, the grains echoing the Viking preference for nutrient-rich sustenance, a reminder that nourishment was a matter of survival, one bowl at a time. Yet, beneath the flavors and textures, remnants of the past lingered like an echo. The Vikings had not only filled their bellies, but had also forged a cultural identity through food that persisted through centuries. The communal act of sharing meals, once a matter of life and death, now served as a comforting ritual that grounded modern Scandinavians in their heritage. And in that restaurant, as laughter mingled with the aromas of the past, one had to wonder, had they truly moved on from the trials of their ancestors, or did the Viking spirit still pulse through their veins, manifesting in every bite? As the evening rolled on, the night held a pulse of its own, a quiet reminder that, while the past may have faded into legend, its influence remained as palpable as the flavors lingering on their plates. Each bite, a story, every toast, a prayer. And yet, deep down, the question persisted. Could they ever truly escape the shadows of their forebears? The ground was frozen solid, a stubborn layer of ice that clung to the earth like a secret. But beneath this frigid facade, the archaeologists dug carefully, unearthing centuries of history, layer by layer. A sharp scrape of metal against stone echoed in the chill air as a bone-handled knife, inscribed with simple runes, surfaced from the earth. It gleamed faintly, a solitary remnant of a bygone era, whispering tales of meals shared and lives lived in defiance of the harsh Norwegian winters. What stories would this small artifact reveal? Across the excavation site, another team member brushed away dirt from what appeared to be charred remnants of a feast. Potatoes, barley, and a smattering of fish bones, their shapes weathered but telling. The Viking diet, diverse yet practical, reflected the land's bounty and the sea's catch. They didn't have the luxury of a grocery store or a takeout menu. Instead, they foraged, hunted, and preserved. They learned to dry their fish in the wind, to turn grains into hearty porridge, to ferment leftovers into tangy treats. This was survival. But which of these foods kept them alive through the bitterest of winters? The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced over the excavation site, as the archaeologists pulled more findings from the grasp of the earth. A sturdy wooden bowl, polished smooth from repeated use, was filled with the remnants of a meal. A stew, hearty with root vegetables and meat. the flavors mingling in a dance of necessity. They had learned to make the most of what they had, turning humble ingredients into sustenance fit for a warrior. Yet how did they adapt their cooking for the harshest months? As the sun dipped below the horizon, the air sharpened, a reminder of the encroaching night. The archaeologist wiped a bead of sweat from their brow, hardly believing how these remnants of the past spoke louder than words ever could. Each find was a grain of understanding, bringing them closer to the people who once roamed this land with their fierce hearts and ever-hungry bellies. But a chill crept through the air, not just from the gathering darkness, but from the realization that the more they discovered, the less they felt they truly knew. What lay hidden, still buried in this frozen tomb? In the chill of early dawn, sunlight streamed through the fog, casting a golden hue over the remnants of the Viking settlement. A lone figure strolled along the frigid shore, the crunch of frost underfoot echoing the resilience of a civilization long gone. What did these fierce Norsemen know about survival that modern society has forgotten? They didn't just endure. They thrived in a landscape that would reduce most to despair. Their meals were a testament not only to necessity, but also to ingenuity. Fermented fish and dried meats hanging in smokehouses, pickled vegetables glistening with the promise of sustenance. The sharp scent of salt water mingled with the earthy aroma of the ground, where, beneath layers of history, lay the bones of their tenacity. It was a rich tapestry of life and death, woven together by the hands that prepared their meals. A simple bone-handled knife, inscribed with runes, was once an essential tool for these people, granting them the power to transform raw ingredients into something nourishing and vital. They understood the delicate balance of nature. They knew that for every hunt, there must be respect and gratitude, a ritual of sorts. But what can a contemporary world, distracted by convenience and fast food, learn from these ancient warriors? Perhaps the Vikings' reverence for their food, the way they turned hardship into sustenance, offers a blueprint for modern survival. They cherished their seasonal harvests, treated their livestock as members of the family, and shared meals that were as much about community as they were about nourishment. Modern diets, often laden with artificial ingredients and disconnected from their sources, pale in comparison to the Viking approach. As people gather around tables today, how often do they consider the journey their food has taken? The Vikings would not simply have seen a meal. They would have seen the blood, sweat, and careful preparation behind it. They lived with an awareness that each bite connected them to their land, their ancestors, and each other. In a world grappling with rapid change, perhaps it's time to embrace that same sense of connection, to fight the prevailing winds of convenience with the roots of tradition. The sun hung low, casting long shadows as the figure turned back towards the settlement, a mingling of hope and uncertainty in their heart. The lessons of the past whispered in the wind, and the question lingered in the air. Could society rediscover its roots before it lost its way entirely? As they walked away, the horizon promised both possibility and responsibility, each step heavier with the weight of what lies ahead.